صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجهم. يا أبا عبد الله يا أبا عبد الله يا أبا عبد الله يا أبا عبد الله دل بیتاب اومده چشم پر از آب اومده دل بیتاب اومده چشم پر از آب اومده اومده ماه ازالش کر ارباب اومده اومده ماه ازالش کر ارباب اومده لشکر مشکی پوشا سینه زنای ارباب شب همه شب میخوند نوحه برای ارباب جان آقا سر قربان آقا سید لطشان آقا جان آقا سر قربان آقا سید لطشان آقا جان آقا سن قربان آقا سید لطشان آقا جان آقا Our hearts are sad and our eyes are filled with tears Our hearts are sad and our eyes are filled with tears Month of Azar has arrived army of Hussein has arrived Month of Azar has arrived army of Hussein has arrived Army dressed in black beating chest for their master All night they lament no half for their master My beloved Hussein you sacrificed everything thirsty Hussein My beloved Hussein you sacrificed everything thirsty Hussein My beloved Hussein you sacrificed everything thirsty Hussein دل من در به در درمان دردش سفره دل من در به در درمان دردش سفره یه نفر نیست که یه شب ما رو زیارت ببره یه نفر نیست که یه شب ما رو زیارت ببره دست ادب را سینه زنای ارباب بای سلامت میران باین پای ارباب جان آقا سر قربان آقا سید لطشان آقا جان آقا سر قربان آقا سید لطشان آقا جان آقا سر قربان آقا سید لطشان آقا جان آقا My heart cries hard and sad days I am going through My heart cries hard and sad days I am going through The only cure is to travel closer to you The only cure is to travel closer to you Is there anyone who can take me towards you? Is there anyone who can take me towards you? As a sign of respect, hands on their chest, Azadar's head to you, greeting on my behalf. My beloved Hussein, you sacrificed beloved Hussein, you sacrificed everything, thirsty Hussein. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajma'in.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله مالك الملك مجري الفلك مسخر الرياح فالق الإصباح ديان الدين رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي لم يتخذ ولدا ولم يكن له شريك في الملك ولم يكن له ولي من الذل وكبره تكبيرا الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على النبي الأمي المكي المدني سيدنا ومولانا ومولى الثقلين بالقاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الغر الميامين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد ولعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم من حين عداوتهم إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد فقد قال الله الحكيم في كتابه الكريم وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يريدون ليطفئوا نور الله بأفواههم والله متم نوره ولو كره الكافرون آمنا بالله وصدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Respected elders, my dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, I would like to offer my condolences on this sad occasion of the shahadat of our 11th Holy Imam, Imam Hassan ibn Ali al-Zaki al-Askari. And indeed, our collective condolences are presented to the Imam of our time, Imam Hujjat ibn al-Hassan al-Askari salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayh. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, who is the true host of tonight's Majlis as we are remembering the martyrdom of his father. And brothers and sisters, as you are aware, the 8th of the holy month of Rabi'ul'Awaal is marked as the last day of the season of grief. In the traditions of subcontinental communities, the season of grief usually begins with the first day of Muharram al-Haram, and it lasts for 2 months and 8 days. Although in some of the communities it lasts for only 10 days, in some other communities they mourn for 40 days, and in some communities, especially the communities which are originally from subcontinent, they extend this season of grief and mourning and remembrance of Sayyid al-Shuhada Aba Abdullah al-Hussein all the way to the 8th of the holy month of Rabi'ul'Awaal. So altogether 68 days or 2 months and 8 days are marked as the season of grief and attached to the remembrance of Sayyid al-Shuhada. But one thing which I would like to make mention of during this night before I talk about the life and the legacy of our 11th Holy Imam is that no matter if someone is remembering Sayyidu Shuhada for the first 10 days of the Muharram al-Haram, or just for only one day of the Ashura, or someone is extended that season of grief all the way to the Arba'in, or for 2 months and 8 days, no matter whatever duration we are lamenting and remembering Sayyidu Shuhada for, we have to be mindful of the purpose of the sacrifice of Sayyidu Shuhada. It was to achieve a goal. So the goal is mentioned in that letter in the form of a very precise but very profound statement. So you always hear that statement, so I will not quote that statement completely. I would just mention one of the phrases from that quotation, where Sayyidu Shuhada, after talking about that why he is not uprising, he says why he is uprising. So he says, إِنِّي لَمْ أَخْرُجْ أَشَرًا وَلَا بَطَرًا وَلَا ظَالِمًا وَلَا مُفْسِدًا. And then he says, بَلْ إِنَّمَا خَرَجْتُ لِطَلَبِ إِصْلَاحِ فِي أُمَّةِ جَدِّي أريد أن آمر بالمعروف وأنهى عن المنكر. So these two sentences. بل إنما خرجت لطلب الإصلاح في أمة جدي. That verily I have left Medina, or I am leaving Medina, to bring a reform, to restore the religion of my grandfather to its original values. Because when he talks about Talab al-Islah, many of the times it is translated as Islah, literally translated as reformation in the faith or the religion. So the actual or true religion did not need any reform, but the people who are sitting on the thrones and representing Islam, as you are aware, this system of monarchy, which was established by Banu Umayyah, and now Yazid, who has become the successor of his father and has declared himself the ruler of Islamic kingdom and representing Islam. So Imam ﷺ, in his words, is trying to tell that I want to restore that religion which is distorted by the so-called representatives of the Islam to back its values when it was established or it was introduced to masses by my grandfather Rasulullah. So this was his first purpose, very clearly mentioned in this statement. And the next statement, which is indeed very important, especially in regard to our lives, and that is, I would say, the prerequisite of the first one. أريد أن آمر بالمعروف وأنهى عن المنكر. So he says that if I were to bring that reform, and if I were to establish the religion how it was established by the Prophet of Islam, I need to enjoin all of you to good, and I have to stop you from doing evil. So Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahi anil Munkar. So Imam alayhi salatu wasalam was capable and was worthy of saying that statement. And he did that. So throughout his journey, we see that whenever he found time or he found a chance to speak to the masses, he tried to complete the reason and the proof of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over the people. So starting from the moment when he is leaving Medina, when he speaks to people, he very clearly tells them the purpose of his uprising. And on his way, when he is arriving in Mecca, so he speaks to masses. So whosoever was present there for Hajj, and indeed Hajj is one of the occasions where you see the unity of whole Ummah. So therefore, one of the wisdoms which I would say behind attending that gathering was to address to the masses and to deliver the message of truth to as many people as he could at that time. So he addressed to those people, he delivered the message, and he explained the purpose of his journey, why he left Medina. So very similarly, we see that he is moving forward, and wherever he stops at different stations, whenever he used to see people, he talks to them and he explains the purpose of his uprising, all the way until the day of Ashura. He addresses the people who are present on the plains of Karbala, the army of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad and Umar Sa'ad, so he speaks to them. So one point which I would like to mention here, that he was an imam who has perfected himself to a level where he does not need to be in a position where we can see that his words are not matching his character. So we know the Prophet of Islam himself, he practiced upon the teachings of Islam before delivering that message to the masses. Very similarly, every single imam, they practiced upon the message, they practiced upon the teachings which they delivered to the people. However, when this message is extended to us, that purpose of Sayyidul Shuhada was to enjoin people to good and forbid them from evil, Amr bil Ma'aruf, wa Nahi anil Munkar, it has a prerequisite for us to do. Because all of us, being among the lovers of Sayyidul Shuhada, it is our responsibility as well to follow his footsteps and to also do Amr bil Ma'aruf wa Nahi anil Munkar. But in terms of us doing this great job, it requires us to fulfill a prerequisite. And that prerequisite is that I have to act upon good and I have to stop myself from doing evil before I enjoin someone else. So before Amr bil Ma'aruf, it is mandatory upon me to do Amal bil Ma'aruf. So Amal is a prerequisite to Amr bil Ma'aruf. And very similarly, if I were to stop someone from doing evil or indecency, the prerequisite is I should stop myself from doing evil and indecency. So brothers and sisters, let's revive this covenant which we make with the beloved Imam Sayyidul Shuhada on each and every single day of the month of Muharram and Safar and during this season of grief by shedding our tears. In fact, when we shed our tears, when we mourn, when we say Ya Hussein, we are reviving that commitment. We are telling Sayyidul Shuhada that, O Imam, we want and we are following your role model. We want to do the same job which you have done. So brothers and sisters, inshallah, having said that, I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us mindful of the teachings of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein and bless us with the opportunity and with the strength in our soul and spirit to follow the commands of Sayyid al-Shuhada and to understand the message of Sayyid al-Shuhada so we become true Hussainis. Therefore, it is of utmost importance as we are culminating this season of grief. We should not forgetful of that message of Sayyid al-Shuhada which was explained throughout the Muharram and Safar. And every day which is ahead of us, inshallah, we will try our level best to fulfill that command of Sayyid al-Shuhada by practicing upon good and by stopping ourselves from evil. And once we have started practicing upon good and we have started stopping ourselves from doing evil, the next step, which is Amr bil Ma'aruf wa Nahi anil Munkar, which is indeed among the furu'at of Islam as well, furu'at of Deen as well. Please recite aloud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajjal farajahum. Having said that, let's move forward to the topic of tonight. As I just have said in the very beginning, that inshallah we'll try to shed some light through the life and the legacy of our 11th Holy Imam. Before I talk about the legacy of our 11th Holy Imam, I would like to draw your attentions towards some of the biographical incidents of this noble Imam. Because when we look at the lives of the later imams after 8th Imam, let's say 9th, 10th, 11th, so these three Imam, we see a different strategy adopted by the rulers of their time, as well as the different strategy adopted by the Imams of Ahlul Bayt in response to the strategy adopted by the rulers. As all of us, we are aware, and it is of very much importance that we should be mindful of the circumstances and the environment in which our Imams were living. So we are aware that now the time in which our 11th Imam and before him 10th and 9th and 8th and then 7th Imam, they have lived. This is the era of the rulership of Abbasid dynasty. So after the culmination of Umayyad dynasty, we can see from the time of Imam al-Baqir, the last and final days of his life, all the way to Imam Sadiq, and then onward we see the uprisings are taking place among the Islamic kingdom or Islamic countries, or the area which was called Islamic kingdom. So people, they have realized the fact that how brutally Banu Umayyah has killed the family of the Prophet, how badly they have violated the sanctity of the family of the Prophet. So the rage which was among the people helped some people to get benefit of that outrage. So we see the movements of Tawabin, Qiyam of Mukhtar, Qiyam of Nafs Zakiya, and all other uprisings we see in result of that feeling which people had in their hearts about that tragedy which took place. So in addition to these qiyams which I just have mentioned, or the moments of taking vengeance of the martyrdom of Sayyid al-Shuhada, Banu Abbas had another plan in their mind. So the plan to take the government in their hands. So we see very slowly, by raising the slogan of Ar-Rida min Ali Muhammad, or sometimes by saying that we want to revenge the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, or we want to return the government, we want to capture it or take it back from Banu Umayyah, and we want to give it back to the true or deserving rulers or deserving Imams of Ahlul Bayt. So that was their slogan in terms of coming to power. So we see in the very early stage, they reflected to people their love and their respect towards Ahlul Bayt, not very clearly mentioning who are Ahlul Bayt for them, because later we have discovered that they would tell people that we are the Ahlul Bayt, we are the cousins of the, we are the offspring of the cousins of Imam Ali or the Prophet, and all these things we can see through the historical accounts later in the history. However, in the very beginning, they were very cunning, and they tried to hide their true motives from people. So consequently, their strategy toward imams was different at that time. So they would leave them alone. Therefore, we can see our 5th and 6th Holy Imam, due to that transition which took place between Banu Umayyah and Banu Abbas, and due to some leniency at that time, they were able to propagate the message of Islam in a very great fashion. And when we look at the lifespan, so they did not have those imminent threats, so they were able to live a very or relatively a longer life. In fact, if we look at the age of the lifespan of our sixth Holy Imam, we find it as the longest among the Ma'sumin, almost 65 years. Whereas we see the Prophet of Islam and Amir al-Mu'mineen 63 years. So that tells us that somehow they were able to find that opportunity to stay engaged with the masses and to deliver the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the people, to train them. However, their popularity, their fame among people, love of people for them, that caused a great amount of jealousy in the heart of their enemies. So consequently, they were poisoned, and that caused the martyrdom of these holy imam. However, after the sixth imam, they tried to adopt another strategy. So we see the seventh imam, much of the time during his life was spent in the prison. So that strategy did not work either. So now from eighth imam onward, they now keep in your mind one very important fact, that they were mindful of that hadith of the Prophet, peace be upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which he talks about the 12 successors after him and all from his family. So this is not the hadith which is present in the books of ahadith of Ahlul Bayt school, but these ahadith can be found in the collection of the traditions among Ahl Sunnat as well. So they were aware and they were afraid of that moment when they will have to face a government which is established on the basis of peace and justice. So they know about the 12th Imam, or the Imam who will establish the peace and the universal justice on the universe. So their effort was to kill these personalities and let not the awaited Savior born. So therefore, after eighth Imam, we see they try to keep these Imam under their direct observation and surveillance. Therefore, you see, one of the reasons why our eighth Imam was forced to leave Medina and he was called to Marv, the major reason was to keep him under his surveillance. And there were some the other reasons as well. For instance, they wanted to show by declaring him or introducing him, which Imam alayhi salatu wasalam was very reluctant to be, but he was announced as a crown prince or Waliul Ahd for the ruler Ma'mun. And after that, we see the very similar strategy to implant the network of spies inside the household. Therefore, we see that Imam al-Jawad was forced to marry the daughter of Ma'mun, al-Fadl. So she served as a spy to the Abbasid Caliph. So, and then later we see Imam al-Hadi, very similarly, much of his time in Muaskar, or the city which is called Samarra or Surra Man Ra'a, because that city was a garrison. So the purpose of inviting him to live there was to have a supervision on our 10th and 11th Imam. As I just have said, the idea was to stop or prevent the birth of the awaited Savior. But Allah had another plan. So, as al-Fadl does not become the mother of the next Imam, that was another plan for Banu Abbas, was that if there will be Imam after eighth Imams. So if that Imam's blood is mixed with Banu Hashim and Banu Abbas, that will resolve their problem. So they had one plan in their mind, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had another plan. Therefore, we see, despite of that house arrest, despite of that imprisonment, despite of that surveillance, our Imams, they were not only mindful and vigilant to their responsibility, but they were doing that, they were performing that responsibility. They were taking care of the duties which they had assigned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even during those terrible circumstances in which they were stopped from meeting people. So this was one of the things which we see, that among the strategies or the legacy of our 11th Imam, and I will speak inshallah later about that. But before I would talk about that legacy, with this introduction, I would like to speak a little bit about the childhood of our 11th Imam. One of the incidents from the childhood of Imam which tells us the significance of his personality. And as I just have indicated, that the lifespan of later Imams were very shorter than the lifespan of the earlier Imams. So our ninth Holy Imam, Imam Muhammad Taqi al-Jawad, so he lived only for 25 years, and his son Imam al-Hadi, he was martyred during his early 40s, and then our 11th Imam, he lived for 27, 28 years. So very, very short period of life they had, but the accomplishment and the legacy, accomplishment they have achieved and the legacy which they have left is immense. Therefore, when we talk about, and therefore they had to start their activities and job right from the childhood, and as it's our part of our belief as well, that Imam is Imam in terms of the qualities and characteristics, no matter whatever age he is in. Yes, physically, and the requirements of this physical world requires for them to go through that process. However, their intellect has achieved that status of perfection at the very young age. Therefore, even Imam al-Jawad, if he becomes Imam at a very young age, at the level of his intellectuality, there is no difference from his intellectuality with the other Imams, no matter he is 7 years or 8 years old. So therefore, we can see the 11th Holy Imam, and it is reported as a very interesting narration in historical books, and there are different accounts of this story. The one which I am mentioning is reported by Qadi Nurullah Shustari in Ahqaqul Haq, and in other books we can find the traces of this story, and it's a very beautiful story which has a lot of lessons for us, especially for our youth. That an old man whose name is mentioned as Bahlul, and this Bahlul is not the Bahlul, the famous one which we know from the time of 6th Imam. So this is another person whose name is Bahlul. So he says that I was passing by a street and I saw a few kids were playing in the street, and apparently they were making fire, or they were playing with the twigs and the wood. So he saw that among those kids there was another child, a young boy, but on a distance from them, and he was crying. So this old man reports that I approached that young man, and I thought that perhaps this child or this young man does not have anything to play with, or for some reason he is deprived of the company of other kids, so let's console him, let's help him. So he says, when I approached him and I asked him that, why are you not playing with them? So the answer or reply which was given to him, it is phenomenal. So it was not an ordinary answer. The answer came from this young man or young boy in the form of a verse of Quran. He says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. أَفَحَسِبْتُمْ أَنَّمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ عَبَثًا وَأَنَّكُمْ إِلَيْنَا لَا تُرْجَعُونَ. That have you thought, or do you think that Allah has, or we are created just in vain, for no purpose, and we are not returning back to Him? We are not returning back to any abode. So I have paraphrased that. So the verse of Quran which talks about the purpose of creation. So this man says, I was amazed after listening to this verse of Quran from that young man. I inquired that, how do you know all this? And you are just a very young child. And then he reports that this child or this young man started to admonish me. So he quoted verses after verses. He quoted some of the poetry which has admonition in it. So he says, I was very inspired. And while talking about hereafter and the intensity of the accountability in hereafter, this boy, while talking about that, got fainted. He was crying, and then he got fainted. So he says that I tried to help that child, and when he opened his eyes one more time, I said, you are just a very young child. Why you are afraid of the punishment of hellfire? Why you are afraid of the hereafter? You don't have any sin. And then he says, this child told me that I observed my mother making the fire inside the house. And it tells us that how important a role is played by the mothers in the family. Indeed, upbringing the children, training them, and giving them the tarbiyat of religion is the responsibility, mutual responsibility of every single individual inside the family. And then at a larger level, it's a responsibility of the society as well. But in personal capacity, father and mother, they have to play a vital role, especially the mother, because she spends most of the time with the children, and the relationship which she has with the children, the affection and emotion, that makes children to learn from her very quick. Therefore, it is said that the first school of a child is his or her home. So whatever he or she learns from the house would be very effective for this child in his or her later life. So Imam says that I have noticed my mother when she makes the fire, before the bigger woods or logs catch the fire, I always see these small sticks and twigs, they catch fire. So as when we make the fire among the big logs and big woods, we put some dry small twigs and little sticks. So we see that they catch fire very quickly, and then they cause other bigger woods to burn. So he says that I have seen that these small twigs, they get burned quickly. So I'm mindful of myself that although I am a child, but I might not become the fuel of the fire of hell. So when our imams, they talk in this way, that necessarily means that they are teaching us, otherwise they don't have any sin, and that tells us the utmost humility and humbleness towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this was one of the incidents from the life of our 11th Holy Imam, in which he is teaching the people in the society that we have to be mindful and cautious to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's commands and the wrath and the punishment which can be fate of the people who have not done good deeds in this war. So this was one story from his early childhood. And then we see that at a very young age, he was under the house arrest. So now this is the time where he himself has a very important responsibility. And as I have said, the same strategy or similar strategy was adopted by previous imams as well, but at this level we see it is practiced at a larger scale. For instance, so the strategy of appointment of the representatives or the network of the representatives. So it's nothing new, and just taking the opportunity of talking about this imam, I would like to remind that our sixth Holy Imam, in fact, the fifth Holy Imam. So when we talk about the fifth Holy Imam, Imam Muhammad Baqir salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, so when he talks to his students and he trains them, among them is Aban ibn Taghlib, so he tells them, O Aban, اجلس في مسجد المدينة وأفتن للناس أفتن الناس اجلس في مسجد المدينة وأفتن الناس فإني أحب أن يرى في شيعتي مثلك. So Imam alayhi salatu wasalam is not only encouraging his student to be a source of guidance for people, but he wants others to be like him. First of all, to inquire, and then to learn, and then to teach. So this tells us the concept of fuqaha or marja'iyya, or people coming to the scholars and inquiring their needs and their questions from them, is not only it's not an innovation, because many these days they would say, oh, it was an invention of the Safavid time. It got flourished at that time, but we have the traces of this practice by our imams in their lives. We know the Prophet, peace be upon him, appointed people and sent the deputies in different parts of the Arabian Peninsula to be the source of guidance for the people. Very similarly, I have quoted this phrase from our fifth Holy Imam, and then sixth Imam. Then eighth Imam, people they used to come. For instance, Ali ibn Musayyib Hamadani, he reports that once I went to our eighth Imam and I told him that, oh Imam, I have come from a very far city, so it becomes very difficult sometimes for me. So Imam in response is asking, why have you come to me? Have I not appointed someone in your city? And he asks, who is your deputy or trustee? And Imam says, Zakaria ibn Adam. And then he says, Al-Ma'munu ala ad-dini wa dunya, that Zakaria ibn Adam in your city is my representative and my deputy. He is not only guarantor of your hereafter, but he will help you in this world as well. So Imam is teaching us that the true scholarship, the true representatives of the Imams, they are not only our guides for our affairs related to hereafter, but they are our guides to help us in our worldly affairs as well. So we see that practice in the life of our Imam al-Askari alayhi salatu wasalam. However, with one big difference. During the time of previous Imams, the people, they had this opportunity. If they had to go to see Imams, they could have gone to them. And representatives, they used to come and they used to ask their question. They used to give their trusts of homes and other financial dues which they have collected from people. They would deliver to the Imams. But now the 11th Imam, under the house arrest and very intense surveillance on him, it was not possible for people to go and ask the questions. So even the representatives, when they used to come, they had to adopt the, for instance, the strategies to disguise, to hide themselves. So the so for instance, history tells us that they would disguise themselves in the form of an oil seller, so someone who sells the shortening. So they would hide the letters of people in canisters of oil. So in a very clandestine fashion, they would come and they would bring the money of people, give it to Imam, and then give the letters to Imam, and they used to sell their oil, and then again they had to hide the letters. So in that way, Imam والسلام, had to communicate with people. But he was training and teaching at the same time, because there were many theological challenges during the time of our 11th Imam. As previous Imams, they also had these challenges. But particularly talking about our 11th Imam, one very wonderful incident, and it tells us the significance of a present Imam among the people, that Imam learned through some of the people around him that there is a philosopher who is compiling a book or a manuscript in which he is proving that there are contradictions in the book of Quran. Again, just to explain it a little bit, that you see the verses of Quran which are talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's existence, that he says that نَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْكُم مِّنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ, that we are closer to you than your own jugular vein. It tells us the spiritual realm or spiritual being and existence or metaphysical existence of God. But at the same time, we have the verses which talk about وَسَعَ كُرْسِيُّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, that Allah's throne, His chair, is greater than these heavens and the earths. So this person, probably taking the verses in their literal sense, is objecting on Quran. And there were some verses mentioned in the history that what were the evidences for him to compile that book. So when Imam والسلام, learned about the intention and efforts of that person, he, by some chance, he got a chance to see his students. So when Imam والسلام, talks to the disciples of Ishaq ibn Yaqub ibn Ishaq Kindi, so Imam says, can you not stop your teacher from writing that book? So they say that we do not have that much of knowledge. We know that what he is doing is not right, but we cannot argue to our teacher. So Imam says, okay, I will teach you. And for over a period of time, Imam والسلام, taught them that how to encounter with Yaqub ibn Ishaq al-Kindi. But one very important thing, and it is mentioned in the historical accounts talking about this very incident, that Imam first asked them that when you go and talk to your teacher, what should be your manners? So you have to respect him. First, you need to get his affection towards you. You want to have that status there. He can trust in your words. So it tells us of a very important aspect of the communication in this world, an art of communication, and as well as when we want to do da'wah, we want to do amr bil ma'ruf, we want to do tabligh, or we want to deliver the message of Islam. It is very important that we have a sense of understanding, intimacy with the people where we want our message to be effective. So Imam والسلام, asked them to serve their teacher and to be closer to him. So they do same things, long story short. So Imam taught them the strategy. What was that answer? What was that response? So when they found a time where they could talk to their teacher in a very respectful sense, the student who learned this from Imam al-Askari told to Yaqub ibn Ishaq Kindi that the book which you are writing about the contradictions in the holy book of Quran, if Quran comes to you and tells you that what you meant by my verses is not that I meant by these verses. Or in other words, a very, very famous principle of hermeneutics, that someone who talks, who invents the language, someone who writes, the notion or the understanding of the creator of those words can be different than the understanding of a reader or a listener. So Imam ﷺ, in a very theological and in a very rational way, delivered that message to him, that perhaps what you are understanding from the verses of Quran, that is not exactly meant by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or by Quran. So when Yaqub ibn Ishaq al-Kindi listened to this statement, he said, you are right, yes. Perhaps what I am understanding from these verses is something else from what Quran is talking about. Therefore, he inquired, where did you get this statement from? And he said, oh, I thought I pondered upon Quranic verses and I reached to this calculation, or I reached to this statement. And Yaqub ibn Ishaq al-Kindi, he smiled. He said, no, this is not the true answer. Tell me, who taught you this? And then they said that Hassan ibn Ali, from the family of the Prophet, he taught us this. And he says, yes, he is actual inheritor of the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the actual, the mufassir of the Quran. Therefore, after listening to this, he decided to burn his book and he became the student of Imam. So this is one last saying of our Imam, and inshallah I will conclude, that he says, Man kana al-wara'u sajiyatuhu wal-karamu tabi'atuhu wal-hilmu khullatuhu kathura sadiquhu. And I would say that this is very important in this day and age where we have this challenge of COVID as well. Everybody wants to have good people in his company. One of the complaints of our youth is that I want to have good friends, but I do not get many friends. Imam is giving us a key how we can have a wonderful company around us, how we can increase in our friendship circle. Imam says, Man kana al-wara'u sajiyatuhu, that someone piety becomes his nature, and wal karamu tabi'atuhu, and part of his nature becomes the generosity, and wal hilmu khullatuhu, and his way of conduct becomes the forbearance. He will automatically get a lot of friends. So if you are pious, if you are generous, and if you are the forgiveful to people, if you are having forbearance towards their mistakes, wrongdoings, their shortcomings, then you will be getting a lot of people around you, and then you will be getting a lot of friends. But one thing which is very important, and unfortunately I do not have time to explain that, wal wara'u sajiyatuhu. So when you are pious in your conduct, then you will not get anyone around you who is not pious, because piety attracts pious people. So one of the benefits of acquiring these three qualities is that the friendship circle which we will acquire in result of these three qualities will be also a very good circle, very good friendship circle. And that is indeed one of the reasons why we come to the Majalis of Ahlul Bayt, why we come to each other, especially in terms of the gathering in masajid or mahafil or majalis, is to not only remember Ahlul Bayt, but to find good people and be a good company for other people as well. So this was the reason why we see that people were around the Ahlul Bayt. No matter how hard these tyrants tried their best to stop people from getting attached and associated to the Imams, due to these noble qualities, and they have given us that secret as well, people, they would gather around Imam. They would be attracted to our Imams. And very similarly, even our 11th Imam, although he was in house arrest, they would put guards on him, and those guards would be attracted to Imam. They would ask people to punish them or to torture on them, but the people they used to come to torture imams, they would become their servants, they would become their friends because of that character. So that was not acceptable for the tyrants. Therefore, they killed them one by one. And very similarly, we see our 11th Holy Imam was poisoned at a very young age. And that was in result of that jealousy and that fear of him getting famous among people and people getting attached to him, the fear of revolt against the rulers of their time. Therefore, when Imam والسلام, was poisoned, and our 11th Holy Imam, the last moment of his life, these were not ordinary moments as compared to other imams. Yes, we know some other imams, they had solitude, they had loneliness, but 11th Imam, even the doctors which were appointed to see him were the spies of the rulers, because they were behind the son of 11th Imam. They wanted to assassinate him. However, it was Allah's will, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved 4th Imam with his wisdom on the day of Ashura. Very similarly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved our 12th Imam at that time. However, when the time comes to give him ghusl and kafan, Imam alayhi salatu wasalam comes out with the permission of Allah. And it is said that the challenge which he had to face at that time was a great challenge, because his uncle wanted to proceed with salat, but Imam of our time, he went forward and he snatched the aba and he asked him to step away, because only Imam can take care of the rituals and the final rites of the previous Imam. And I would say that, oh Imam, you were there, you have seen your father, but you shrouded him, you washed his body. But our salams to be on your grandfather Sayyid Sajjad, who was in the state of unconsciousness on the plains of Karbala. It is said that on the day of Ashura, when Abu Abdullah al-Hussein was left alone, his companions Habib ibn Mudahir, his companion Abu Sumama Saydawi, his companions, all his companions, Hur and others, they are martyred. Now, the family members are also martyred. No, there is no Abbas or Ali Akbar or Qasim or Ono Muhammad. Imam is all by himself, comes to the plains and looks right and looks left and calls upon the people by saying, Hal min nasri yansuruna. No answer, no response comes back. Imam goes inside the tent and says his final farewell, bid his farewell with his sister Zainab. Zainab says, oh my brother Hussein, if you have to decide to go to the battlefield, now go and say farewell with your son Ali ibn al-Hussein. Bibi Zainab goes to Ali ibn al-Hussein, tries to wake him up, says, O Sayyid Sajjad, open your eyes. This is the time your father is bidding farewell with you. Look at him for last time. Sayyid Sajjad opens his eyes, and in front of him a face which he cannot recognize. Within few hours, there is blood all around the face of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Looks at the face and says, who are you? Imam says, I'm your father. Then Sayyid Sajjad says, what has happened to you? Imam says, don't ask me. All of a sudden ask, where is my brother? Where is my uncle? Abbas. Imam says, qad qutil. Says one by one, everyone is killed. And then he says, oh my son, Sayyid Sajjad, now listen. Among the people who are surviving in these tents, I am the one and you are the one. Sayyid Sajjad tells to his Aunt Zainab, Aunt Zainab, bring me a stick and bring me a sword. Says, what would you do, my son? Says, don't you see my father is left alone? I would take the help of this stick to get up and I would go to the battlefield. Sayyidah Zainab says, no, my son, Sayyida Sajjad, you have to go all the way to Kufa and Sham, as she is saying, O Sayyida Sajjad, there is a long journey ahead of you. Sayyida Sajjad again gets fainted due to that sickness. And Sayyid Shuhada goes to the battlefield. And times went by, Kufa or Sham. And then when this caravan is returning to Medina, Sayyid Sajjad one more time is approaching to that city, which is the city of his grandfather, which is the city of Rasulullah. Asks for a poet, Bashir ibn Jazlam, and he tells him, O Bashir, are you able to recite a poetry to inform people of Medina that we are coming? He says, yes, Ya ibn Rasulullah. The Bashir goes outside and calls upon the people. He approaches to Medina before the caravan approaches. Calls upon people by saying, Ya Ahla Yathrib, La maqama lakum biha, قتل الحسين فادمعي مدرارا الجسم منه بكربلاء مدرج والرأس منه على الكنات يدار. O the people of Medina, you should not stay at home because Hussein was killed brutally on the plains of Karbala. And when people heard this, all of them, they came outside. And when the caravan approached, the ladies, they embraced Sayyidah Zainab, they embraced Kulsum. And Kulsum is reciting a poetry which is mentioned, Madina tu Jaddina la taqbalina. O the city of our grandfather, how would you accept us? فَبِالْحَسَرَاتِ وَالْأَحْزَانِ جِينَا, that we have come back with the remorse, with sadness, with the pain. And that says, she says, خرجنا منك بالأهلين جمعا رجعنا لا رجال ولا بنينا. When we left, this was the same city when we left. We left with our family members. My own Muhammad were there. Abbas was there. Hussein was there. Qasim was there. But now we have returned back. No one is with us. None of our men, none of our children are with us. And ulama, they recite at that moment, Sayyidah Zainab, she went to the grave of the Prophet. And she told told the Prophet, O Prophet, look at your ummah, what they have done to your Hussein. And some ulama, they have recited that how patient this lady was. That on the plains of Karbala, when she was told that Ono Muhammad are killed, she did not cry. She did not shed tears. Throughout the journey of Kufa and Sham, she did not cry. No one saw any tear in her eyes. And then in Sham, when the heads are returned to her, she did not even pick the heads of her children. She never cried. But when she approaches back to her own house, now she opens the door. I don't know how did she handle. After all, she is a mother. And when she have looked upon the dresses, the robes and the prayer mats of her own children on Muhammad, how she would have stopped herself. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. शम्मा से शम्मा जले सिलसिला जारी रहे हम रहे या न रहे ये आज़ादारी रहे शम्मा से शम्मा जले अपनी नस्लों को सिखाते रहो मातम का हुनर सीना दर सीना करे बस ये आज़ादारी सफ़र अपनी नस्लों को सिखाते रहो मातम का हुनर सीना दर सीना نہ کرے بس یہ عزاداری سفر، کیسے حالات بھی ہوں یہ عمل جاری رہے، ہم رہیں یا نہ رہیں یہ عزاداری رہے، شمع سے شمع جلے سلسلہ جاری رہے، ہم رہیں یا نہ رہیں یہ عزاداری رہے، شمع سے شمع جلے لاکھ بدلے یہ زمانے کی روش اور موسم، ایک پل بھی نہ رکے اشک عزا اور ماتم، لاکھ بدلے یہ زمانے کی روش اور موسم، ایک پل بھی نہ رکے اشک عزا اور ماتم، ماتم شے کا جنوں ذہن پہ طاری رہے، ہم رہیں یا نہ رہیں یہ عزاداری رہے، شمع سے شمع جلے یہ سبیلیں یوں ہی آباد رہے اہل عذاب، اور گھر گھر میں علم آئے نظر غازی کا، یہ سبیلیں یوں ہی آباد رہے اہل عذاب، اور گھر گھر میں علم آئے نظر غازی کا، یہ علم اونچا رہے یہ علمداری رہے، ہم رہیں یا نہ رہیں یہ عزاداری رہے، شمع سے شمع جلے تم اگر ذاکر شبیر ہو یہ یاد رہے، چاہے اس غم کے لیے سر بھی کٹے گھر بھی جلے، تم اگر ذاکر شبیر ہو یہ یاد رہے، چاہے اس غم کے لیے سر بھی کٹے گھر بھی جلے، حرمت فرش عزا جان سے پیاری رہے، ہم رہیں یا نہ رہیں یہ عزاداری رہے، شمع سے شمع جلے اپنے گھر میں بھی عزا خانہ سجانا ہے ہمیں، اپنے بچوں کو عزادار بنانا ہے ہمیں، اپنے گھر میں بھی عزا خانہ سجانا ہے ہمیں، اپنے بچوں کو عزادار بنانا ہے ہمیں، تاکہ اس نسل میں بھی سلسلہ جاری رہے، ہم رہیں یا نہ رہیں یہ عزاداری رہے، شمع سے شمع جلے سلسلہ جاری رہے، ہم رہیں یا نہ رہیں یہ عزاداری رہے، شمع سے شمع جلے، یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین، اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Dear brothers and sisters, tonight's majlis was sponsored by the family of Brother Aqil Sayyid and Sister Khulud Sayyid. We are very grateful for their generous sponsorship and their commitment. Let's all pray for the sehat, salamti and khair barakat for Brother Aqil Sayyid, his wife, their children and their parents and entire family. For their sehat, salamti and khair barakat, please recite a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The family of Brother Aqil Sayyid and Sister Khulud Sayyid have requested us for a Surah Fatiha for Marhum Itrat Hussain Sayyid and all the Marhumeen of Sayyid and Jafri family. So kindly recite a Surah Mubarakah Fatiha for Isal Sawab of Itrat Hussain Sayyid and Marhumeen of Sayyid and Jafri family, proceeded by Salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta alayhim waladdallin. Allahumma ighfir lahum wahshurhum ma'an nabiy wal a'immatil athhar. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Brothers and sisters, we are also very grateful to Maulana Janab Muslim Mehdi Chawla Sahab Qibla that at a very short notice he was gracious enough to accept our invitation and honor our request to address this final majlis of Ayyam Aza. As you all know, I always feel that this particular majlis of Shahadat of Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salatu wassalam is a very special event and occasion because this marks the conclusion of the season of Aza, and when we begin the Majalis Aza from the 1st of Muharram, so many scholars make their contributions and everyone does their best, and as listeners and as audiences you listen to all of them, but we need a good conclusion at the end that we can draw some good lessons, we can learn some good lessons from this year's majalis, and then we can focus for the next year and until the next Muharram. So we are very grateful and very thankful to Janab Hujjatul Islam Maulana Sheikh Muslim Mehdi Chawla Sahab that who have recited a very wonderful majlis, gave us a lot of food for thought, and let's pray for sehat, salamti and khair barakat of Maulana Chawla Sahab and his entire family. Recite a loud salawat for them. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And we hope that as this pandemic ends, we will invite Maulana and listen to his majalis and his lectures, inshallah, in person at Baitul Ilm. Kindly recite another salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.